MJ on the journey back to Silicon Valley. Welcome to part 3 of the React from Scratch tutorial. In this part, we're going to be going over React forms, how to properly set them up, how to handle events, and how to implement conditional rendering, where we render components on the screen only if a particular condition is met in the world. We will look at React CSS and how it differs from using it with just HTML. And we will also explore Sass and see what is the right way to implement it within a React environment. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Jump back into our code. And in here, let's just go ahead and get rid of our football component. And let me grab a snippet of code here. Okay, so we're going to create a class-based component here called myForm, and that's what we're going to render down here. Okay, so just like HTML, React uses forms to enable the user to interact with the web page. Okay, so this is a form that here you have an H1, this is hello, and then it asks the user to enter their name. So let's go ahead and save and run this. This is how it looks, guys, on the screen. Now, I did add some CSS to just have this in the middle. So basically, it's just a form that says hello, and then it asks you to enter your name. Now, handling forms is about how you handle the data when it changes, or if the data is actually submitted. In HTML, form data is handled by the DOM. In React, the data is handled by the components and all within the components. So when the data is handled by the components and the data is stored in the component state, that's what's responsible, and that's where we get the information from, versus the DOM back in HTML. And you can control these changes by setting up event handlers. Okay? So the next thing we want to do, guys, we're going to add an event handler that watches for changes. So if anything changes with the value here, it will update the component state. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and add our constructor first. Okay, so here we have a constructor. We've looked at it a few times. So it's calling these super props to get inheritance. And then it's setting up a state of a username, and it's just empty here. So username is what we're going to be entering here. So we're starting as a state. We have a username that's empty. And then, so that's how we set up our initial form state right now. The next thing we want to do, we're going to set up a change handler. So if anything changes with the value in our form, we want to have a function to handle that. So we got to set up a function here called myChangeHandler, and this function takes as an argument an event, and then it sets the state to whatever you've entered. So whatever you enter in the field here will be set to state. The state will be updated with whatever you entered, and that's what this function is responsible for. Now, to set up this change handler here, we're going to include a onChange property here in the input. So we're saying that if the value onChange, the value changes, then run this particular function. Okay? And this is an event that we're setting up to handle any change that we're having in our form. Okay? So let's go ahead and save. Right? And then let's see. We don't have anything that will do that. MJ. Yeah, okay. It's not MJ. Well, it works to a certain extent. We're not asking it to show us what we've entered, but it does look like it's working. Now, to really check if that is the case, what we're gonna do is if our state has been changed, let's go into the dev tools. And this is a Chrome extension that enables us to debug React components. You can go ahead and get it installed. Let's go in here. We're going to pull up components. And then here we have the my form component. At the particular moment, the state doesn't have any value in it. So let's go ahead and enter a value into the form. And as you see, the state updates down here. So everything is working properly. Once we enter a value, the onChange that we've set up here handles it and updates our state. So that is how you check if your state is working in React. So React Dev Tool, it's a Chrome extension that you can install, and it will give you a view into your React components that you have in your application. We've looked at how to set up our React form. Now let's look at conditional rendering. Now, if you do not want to display, for example, the H1 here until the user has actually put in an input, you can add an if statement to it. Now, the way we're going to do this, let me go ahead and pull up a snippet of code here, and then I'm going to explain it. So right under the render method, so here we're declaring a variable that is empty. It's the header, and then we're asking if there is a username. So if there is a username that was entered, then the header will be equal to hello and whatever that username is. Or else the header is going to be empty. And then down here in the H1, instead of saying hello, we're going to pass the header variable into here. And now our component will check if there's a username, it's going to say hello, whatever that username is. If there is no username, then it's not going to update, obviously. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And then as you can see now, there's no hello here. It has disappeared. It just says enter your name. So now if I enter my name, here it is. It says hello MJ. So our state is set up, and also our conditional rendering is set up. Now, this hello name, we're only going to see it if there is a username. If there is no username, it will simply be empty. So that is how you set up conditional rendering. Some condition has to be met, and only when that condition is met, there is any rendering to the screen. So that's conditional rendering in a nutshell. This is a form, we may want to submit it. So let's look at how that's done in React. Now, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to add a button down here. And let's put it down here. Okay, so now we have a submit button. And what we want to do, we're going to create a React event that is related to this submit button. At the moment, we only have event that handles the change of the value in our field. But we don't have an event that handles the submitting of this data. So now we have our button set up. The next we're going to set up our submit handler. Let me grab a snippet of code here. Let's put it down here. Okay, so our submit handler, it takes in an event, and then it does a prevent default. This is just prevents the default behavior of the page of refreshing, and then it would alert that you are submitting this particular name. So when we submit that, it's going to alert us that we have actually submitted the data. And I think we set it up right. Let's go ahead and save and see what this does. Okay, let's enter MJ and then hit submit, and it doesn't do it. Okay, what are we doing wrong here? I type submit. Okay. What is missing? Oh, we're not setting up the event in our form. Okay, so for the submit event, this is something that has to be given to the form HTML element. That's where you put your submit. So in here, we're gonna put a on submit. So this is how you do it. Okay, so it's on submit. Remember, it's always camel casing. And then once the button is pushed, we're gonna run this function that's supposed to alert to us on the screen that we have submitted the data. So now let's go ahead and save this. And let's enter MJ. And here it is, guys, it works. So now we have our event set up for the change of data. So whatever data that we enter into the field, the state gets updated right away. And then if we submit that data, also we have a submit handler that alerts us that, hey, you have submitted this particular data. In this case, it's a username. So we have our submit part set up. The next thing we want to take a look at is how to set up multiple input fields. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Refresh this thing here. Multiple input fields. We're going to go about it this way. We're going to change the state. Instead of just username, we're going to have username and age. Okay, so username is set up to a empty string, and then age is set up to null. Okay, and then in the my change handler, we're gonna do this here. So instead of this change handler, we're gonna set up this one. So this change handler takes in an event as an argument, and then it creates a variable called name and gives it the event target name. And then there's a variable called value, which takes the event.target that value. And then it sets the state to, this is a way to do it in JavaScript where it gives you an object with keys. So this is how you set it up. You write name inside an array, and then give it val as the property. And this will allow us to handle both the name and the age dynamically with one change handler. Okay. The next thing, the form is going to look a bit different. So let's go ahead and just change everything in here. And instead we're going to have this. Okay, so what's going on here, you have an H1, it says hello. It has the state username and then the state age. So it will ask you to enter your name. Let's go ahead and save this so we can look at it visually. Okay, so this is how it looks. So it asks you to enter your name, and then it asks you to enter your age. Now, when we enter both of these, let's go MJ 40 and then hit enter. Now, both of these are handled with one change handler, which is this one right here. Okay? Now, let's take a look at it in the dev tools to see if our state is being actually, if both values are being updated properly. Yeah, and we do have it here. So here you have age and username are updated. So we can use only one change handler. Now you can use multiple change handlers, but the best practice in React is to use one change handler in this particular form here. Okay? So that's how you handle multiple inputs in React. Deal with the data that the user has entered. Let's say they enter a data that is wrong. You may want to have some validation in there. And a simple way to do it is just to include an if statement. Like for example, if the user enters a string instead of a number for age, we're going to put an if statement to handle that. So we're just going to put it right under here. So here we're saying if the value of age, if the name of age, because we've defined it as name here, so if age is not a number, okay, if it is not a number, it's going to alert your age must be a number. And this is a way to validate your input field. Let's go ahead and save this. And now let's go to age and enter a name, for example. There it is. It tells us your age must be a number. So this is a way to validate your input field. You put an if statement and check that the user actually has entered the correct information that they're supposed to enter. And let's see. Yeah, so that's basically how you do it. Okay, next we're going to look at how to add an error message. So having an alert when the user makes a mistake is a bit annoying. Ideally, you want to have an error message that tells us what the particular mistake that the user has made. And to do that, first we're going to add an error message to the state. And the error message is going to initially be empty. And the next thing, we're going to include an if statement that's different than the one that we have currently. All right, so in here, we're checking if the name is equal to age, and this is just checking if this is related to age. So if the value is not a number, then it will render a strong element here, a strong HTML element that says your age must be a number. And then next we're gonna set the state to that error, because now we have an error message in the state, so we're gonna set it here. And the next thing we're gonna down here, and whatever we're rendering, we're gonna render that error message. So we're gonna go this dot state dot error message. And now if we save, it fails to compile. It says error is not defined. Okay, line 19. Line 19. Let's see here. Error is not defined. 19. Oh, we have not defined the error value, the error variable. I'm sorry. Okay, so and then we're just gonna put an empty string. Let's go ahead and save. It should work now. Okay, so now if we go to age and enter a string instead, here it is. It just spits the mistake right here, and it says your age must be a number. Now, ideally, an error has a red color, but this is just for the sake of seeing how this works. So that's how you set up an error message. So we're rendering it down here. So if the user enters something that we don't want them to enter, we will just see the error here. Okay? So that's how you add error messages. It's better than using alert statements. Okay, so that's basically handling forms in a nutshell. We've looked at how to set up the form, how to set up its state. We've looked at how to handle changes, how to handle submit, and also how to handle validation. Next up, we're going to look at some React CSS and see how different it is from using it with just regular HTML. Look at our CSS and how we implement it in React. Let's jump back into our code. I got rid of the form component. Let's just get rid of it here as well. And then instead, we're gonna put two HTML elements here. Let's keep this simple. And let's save. And what this is basically giving us is this is an H1 and then a P tag. Now we can use inline styling in React, and this is how it's done. Okay? So you always use double curly braces and then write your CSS in here. And this is how you write inline style in React. Oh, we've done a mistake here. Let's just go back. Okay, so that's one way to write it in style, the same way we would do it in HTML. Make sure you always have double curly braces, and then inside there, write your CSS. Now, in JSX, JavaScript expressions are written inside curly braces. And since JavaScript objects have curly braces, and also styling has curly braces, that's what leads to having the double curly braces that you see. And also, if you have a property, for example, that has two words, like let's say background. Background color, this is how we normally write it in CSS, but that would not work within JSX. You need to use camel case letters. So background color would look like this. This is how you write it in JSX. So keep that in mind. Always use camel casing. The other thing we're going to take a look at, you can also define an object that has a bunch of CSS properties and then give that object over to an HTML element. Like let's say, for example, we can do this. We can define style as a const. Okay, so right here we can define style as a const. And then we can just give my style to this H1 here, for example, right? We don't need double curly braces here. We can just evoke my style, right? And then if we save, it should work. Yep, here it is, okay? So that's another way to write CSS in React. Just define an object, put all the CSS properties that you need, and then just use that object, give it to HTML elements, and it will have automatically everything that's all the CSS properties that are within that object. Okay, so that's how you can do inline styling. You can use objects, or you can use a completely separate style sheet and then import it into your app. Okay, so that the same way we're seeing it here. Like here, we see an import of app.css, which is a completely separate style sheet file. It's here, and then we're importing it in. So 3 ways to write CSS in React. One, inline style. Second is to define an object with bunch of CSS properties, then use that object on whatever HTML element that you need or component, or create a completely separate style sheet and then import it into your app component. Next up, we're going to look at Sass, which is a really interesting preprocessor for CSS that enables us to write variables. We'll see how that's implemented in React. Sass setup. So what Sass is it's a CSS preprocessor, and it's executed on the server, and then the CSS is sent to the browser. Okay. So now, to install CSS, we do need to go to our terminal. Let me go ahead and close this. So we open up our terminal, and then in the terminal, we're gonna do npm install node sass, and then hit enter. And this will go ahead and install Sass locally. This may take a moment, depending on the now that we have our Sass installed, let's go ahead and create a file. It's going to be a Sass file. Let's go into the source folder and create a file called styles.scss. And that is how you create Sass files, for those who are not familiar with it. And in here, simply, we're going to create a variable called special color. And this will just be, let's just go with blue. And then we're going to do special color 2, and we're just going to do red. And that's the great thing about Sass, is that you can create actual variables in CSS, which was not possible before Sass was created. Okay, so now we've created 2 special colors, and in here, what do we have? We have an H1 and a P tag. So the H1, we're gonna give it a color. We're gonna give it the first special color, and then for our P tag, we will give it the second special color. We'll give it the second special color. Let's go ahead and save. Let's go into our app, and then in the app, we're gonna import our Sass file. So in here, we do import, what do we call it? We call this styles. No, we're just gonna import the path. So let's go styles.scss. Yeah, I think it's in the same directory. Okay, let's go ahead and save. Okay, failed to compile. Okay, what are we doing here? Hold on, let's see. We did create this in our source folder, right? Okay, so that's that. Oh, yeah. Okay, so H1. Let's remove this style here. Let's go ahead and save. There's something weird. Okay, let's see. Oh, it says our Sass version is not compatible. So we have apparently 5.0 and it's incompatible with 4.0. That is interesting there. Let me go ahead and debug this, be right back. I just went to Stack Overflow, check this out. The problem is we need to uninstall Sass because what we have right now is version 5. We need to uninstall it and then install version 4. And as you can see, it's working right now. And just for those who are interested in how to do this, I'm going to go ahead and just put this here. Okay, so in your terminal, you're going to go ahead and enter this. First, uninstall 4. Okay? So these two lines here, put them in your terminal. Once version 4 is installed, and if you run it again, it would actually work. So that's how Sass is working. So we have a file, we define two variables, two special colors, special color 1 and then color 2. And then we've given in the app.js, we've imported it. And then our H1 and P will automatically have that. Okay? Now it's freaking out because we left these two lines here. Here it is, so it's working right now. So that's how you include Sass in your React application. This is, I don't know what it's doing here. Hold on. Build. Okay, it's working. It was just buggy. That's how you set up Sass in your React project. Now, you don't need to use Sass all the time, but for those who want to be able to actually use variables in CSS, Sass is an amazing way to do that. And with that, that concludes the React from Scratch tutorial. I hope you really enjoyed it. I've had a lot of fun creating this tutorial. If you did like it, hit the thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel for more, and please consider supporting the journey with a cup of coffee. There's a link on how to do that in the video. So until next time, this is MJ on the journey back to Silicon Valley.